I'm Cheryl Moore-Gough, and we're at my new home in Bozeman near Highlight Elementary School. Bob and I lived halfway to Belgrade on about an acre, and when he became ill, I realized that particular yard was going to be too much for me to care for, so I downsized and moved into town. So I started out with pretty much just turf. There wasn't even a planting at the foundation of this house. There was a probably 10-foot by 20-foot plot where the previous owners tried to grow vegetables in horrible soil and a sandbox. And so I envisioned since this is a real sunny corner of the yard, I envisioned raised beds. And I'd built my own raised beds in a previous house, but I wanted something a little fancier that I couldn't do myself. So I enlisted the Cashman team, and they came out and transformed my yard using Shelley's drawings, Shelley Engler, who's their landscape architect. So we have a couple of different themes in this very small urban yard. I have my vegetable garden in the sunny corner, and then I have a swale of grass that kind of ties everything together, but it's a very small swale, so it's just enough for the dog to play in. And the other end of the yard, which we'll look at in just a minute, has a completely different feel. So a couple of things I wanted to point out, and that is that the beds are made of metal, and the Cashman crew built them in place, welding them right there in place according to the design. And to carry that theme a little further, I had this gorgeous gate custom forged by the Sore Elbow Forge folks, Heather, this young lady who is a blacksmith. I gave her a drawing of pole beans, and this is what she came up with, and it is to keep the dog out. I love my dog, but I don't want him in my vegetable garden. So we're kind of in the far corner. This is the northwest corner of the vegetable garden. Last time I talked in Rapid City, they gave me some seeds, one of which was this watermelon that they promised me I would get watermelons from. They're a baby watermelon, but I've got some pretty good sized ones here the first week in August, so I'm hopeful. I'm pulling off extra flowers just to make sure that the plant doesn't try to set too many watermelons, and none of them will then therefore ripen. Behind me, these are sunspot sunflowers. It's one of my favorite varieties. Bob and I picked up the seeds in Fredericksburg at a seed farm, and behind them, of course, are Grandpa Ott's Morning Glories, the flower that started Seed Savers Exchange, and I've been saving those seeds for many years and enjoying them. They're beautiful, and people think I'm crazy for putting Morning Glories in my vegetable garden, but they're just annuals. So if they come up where you don't want them, they're an annual weed as opposed to bindweed, which is perennial, and it's a horrible, horrible thing to have in your garden. I tried an experimental crop this year. Down here is Semposai, and I learned about it at the Zone 4 magazine's Plant to Plate, where someone from Colorado said that they were using it in their CSA, and the leaves are nice for wraps. Where typically you use collards. They're pretty hefty, but these are much more tender, they're sweet, and they're absolutely delicious. So that's Senposai. Of course, we have to have carrots and beets, the bok choy's done, Cocozelle zucchini, and yellow fin zucchini. And the yellow fin is very, very prolific. It beats the Cocozelle hands down as far as being prolific, but the Cocozelle I think has a much nicer flavor than the yellow fin. So my stepson loves lemon cucumbers, and he doesn't seem to be able to have a knack for growing them. So I gave him some plants, and I planted some in my own yard, and we've got some lemon cukes coming on very nicely. A lot of people think that this is a new variety. It's not. It's an heirloom variety that's been around forever. It's round. It will ripen to a yellow, hence the name lemon cucumber. My pole beans are interesting to me this year. I had an incident with the lawn care people, and I had some herbicide drift or volatilization. And of course, the most sensitive plants to that are your beans and your tomatoes. And this time of the year, the tendrils are up to the top. However, you see that they have pretty much stopped. We have some very typical herbicide damage on these leaves. It's called cupping, and there's also puckering, so the leaves actually form a cup. However, this doesn't seem to be causing a problem with production. I've got beans coming on down low on all 8 of my plants. I have 3 different varieties of tomatoes. These 3 on this side are the Heirloom Black Seaman, and the other 2 are Steakhouse, and they were featured on the Burpees catalog with tiny, tiny hands and a great big tomato. I do have a great big tomato forming on the Steakhouse, but I'd like you to notice what I'm using for my supports for the Black Seaman. This plant is so prolific, the tomatoes get so heavy that the regular cages can't support them. These are Aikido swords. I train in the Japanese martial art of Aikido, and we use wooden swords made of white oak. And after they get so many splinters that they're actually dangerous to train with, I get to bring them home and give them a happy home in my garden supporting tomatoes. So one of the really nice things about this layout is it has beautiful, beautiful lines, nice curves, sharp corners, but nature doesn't always do that, work that way. So what I have here is a combination of small pumpkins and a baby Hubbard squash that wants to ramble. So I'm letting it spill out of this lovely bed into this big empty space that Shelley designed for a garden chair. Perhaps I'll put a chair in next year, but this is a great opportunity for this plant to just kind of ramble out and do its thing. So some of the plants that I have in my garden, even though my garden's really small, I'm going to be saving seeds from. One of our featured guests is the spinach plant. There are male plants and there are female plants, and when you save spinach seeds, you have to be sure that you have both. And you can't tell if they're male or female until they start to bolt, and then they have different characteristics. The male produces its pollen on these little spikes in the axils of leaves, but the female produces seeds in the axils. So you can tell the difference with the male and the female plants by the location of the seeds and the production of pollen. Back here we have a male plant that has already produced all the pollen that it will, and it's dying. So the male plants die quite a bit before the females. To save the seeds from the female plant, you wait until the plant pretty much yellows, take it inside, dry it, and remove the seeds by stripping from the bottom to the top of the plant. Or you can, if you're happy with where your spinach is growing, you could just leave that female plant in place and have the earliest spinach on the block in spring. Another plant that I'm saving seeds from this year is my Swiss chard. This is 5-color silver beet, and it's an heirloom variety. So the Bright Lights F1 probably used this plant as one of its parents. When they bred the Bright Lights, however, they did it to make the stems more colorful, and it was at the expense of the production of leaf tissue. In my trials, the 5-color silver beet was much more productive, and you can see the colors are absolutely gorgeous. It's a biennial plant, and so to save the seeds, I had to select for color, and so I have one of each of the 5 different colors. I will leave it alone and let it grow as beautiful and robust as I can this year. At the end of the season, I'll cut the leaves off, take the root, put it in damp sand, and keep it in the crawl space of my basement, replant it next year, at which time it should bolt and produce seeds. If you want to save Swiss chard seeds, you really should never save from plants that bolt the year that you plant, because then you're perpetuating that characteristic, because you don't want plants to save seeds from plants that bolt early, or you just are going to get baby plants that bolt early. And I wanted to showcase my very favorite variety of lettuce. Here it is the first week of August, and black-seeded Simpson is still going strong. It's very, very slow to bolt. It's very sweet and actually very beautiful. Behind it is hiding a red romaine that has also been very slow to bolt. The rest of them bolted, but it's a pretty contrast in a salad bowl to have something this beautiful light green with this deep, deep, deep red. And right behind it, we have a plant that not a whole lot of people like to plant or know that we can grow here, and that's celery. It won't get the beautiful, large, blanched stalks, but you can see that it does get some nice, usable stalks. Very, very good flavor. I make a lot of soup, homemade soup, and so this freezes well, and I use this in my soups. So celery does very well here. It can get aphids, and if you're lucky, you have a population of wasps that will take care of your aphids for you. So this is the sunny end of the yard. The other end of the yard is underneath some monstrous cottonwoods. And so Shelley made this beautiful sweeping design with a little bit of turf in the middle. Towner at Cashman handmade this beautiful patio out of flagstones. And underneath the cottonwoods, we have a shade garden up against the fence. And on this side of the walkway, we have a scent garden. And I'm going to put highly scented plants in there to enjoy while sitting on the patio.
What's happening to this gnome, Cheryl?
Well, the gargoyles are carrying him away. There's all kinds of garden gnomes that you can get doing just about anything. In fact, in the other part of the yard, we have a dinosaur carrying away a few gnomes.
Okay, welcome to the Mathre residence. My wife Judy and I have lived here since 1967, so this is our 47th year, I believe. Same house, same family, same wife the whole time. And we've had a garden here probably from almost the very beginning.
Tell us about these raspberries, Judy.
These are Latham's, and Don says they were planted about
6, 7, 8 years ago.
And they're past their peak right now, which is kind of a relief because this is only one of 2 raspberry patches I have. This is the one that's kind of the newest. The other one is behind me over on the other side of the corn, and it's the original patch, and it is now getting bigger than this one. But the original patch kind of failed, but they have an underground root system, and they moved east. And I think I'm getting more raspberries now out of that one, which rejuvenated itself, recreated itself. So I have 2 patches about this size.
So a lot of raspberries.
Lots and lots.
Judy, it looks like you've invented a few things to assist you in raspberry picking.
Well, I say necessity is the mother of invention, and you have to have your hands free to pick. So this is an old milk jug that I've adapted so that I can use it, plus an old belt to hold it on. And the reason I wear this glove is these are not thornless. They have pretty good thorns. So I can handle the raspberry cane and pick with my other hand.
Well, the rest of the garden besides the raspberries is a vegetable garden. We try to grow all of the sweet corn that we can eat in a year, all of the green beans, all of the peas, all of the broccoli. We either freeze them or can them, and it'll last us a whole year. So we hardly ever go to the grocery store and buy fresh produce. So that's our goal. The garden isn't a huge garden. It's probably maybe 50 feet by 75 feet in size. So everything is really crammed in here pretty tightly, closer together than you would normally recommend that a garden be. The corn should be 36 inches apart in the rows. My rows are 30 inches apart. And we can see the broccoli and the carrots are actually between the peas, and we try to cram as much in here as we possibly can. Okay, we like to grow lots of tomatoes because my wife is a vegetable soup maker. Then the main ingredient are tomatoes. Right here I've got probably 10 different varieties, a total of 55 plants just crammed in here tightly. Some of them we'll pick ripe. As you can see, there are some that are starting to get ripe here. But most of them we'll let go until the first frost, and then we'll pick them all green, take them inside into our sunroom and let them ripen up, and then we'll can them. So we'll get lots and lots of tomatoes. We'll probably put up 50 pints and 20 or 30 quarts of tomatoes that my wife then uses the whole year long. We like the early Goliath for a large tomato. We like the Sun Golds for the cherry tomatoes. Then we have a mixture of other tomatoes just to kind of spread things out so we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. We've had a horrible time keeping strawberries in the ground because they get contaminated with a soil-borne fungus that causes black root rot. And so this year I decided I'd go to a raised bed. This is our first experience with a raised bed. We've got it filled with Jerry Cashman's Best Soil Compost Combination. And then we have some a new variety for me anyway. It's a variety called Sparkle that's growing here in the front part of the bed, and another one called Honey Eye in the back that hopefully will be producing strawberries for us next year. So they're off to a pretty good start and they're looking good. Hopefully they'll be productive next year. 2014 has been a fantastic year for the cole crops like cabbage. I've got 3 cabbages here, 3 different varieties so I can spread out the maturity. We got one that's an Earliana from Burpees, and then the other is a variety called Chow, C-H-O-U, that's got a little bit later season. 3 heads of cabbage will do us for the year. We're not big cabbage eaters, but we do like to have some. And then we have down here kohlrabi. We always grow about half a dozen kohlrabi heads. Are good for salads. And then right along here we have broccoli. Usually grow around 70 or 80 broccoli plants because we like to freeze that. These have all been picked so far, so now we're just getting the secondary heads. Well, beans are one of my favorite crops. They're so productive, and we use the variety Jade, the same variety that the Garden Club uses. And you can see we're getting beans like this. This is the 3rd picking on it. I try to put up about 52 pints of canned beans each year. One of my favorite crops, and it's basically a crop that never fails if you water it. Right next to it we have peas. This is a variety called Green Arrow. That's a very productive pea variety. We've pretty much finished picking those. Been very productive. Put it on the fences so we keep them off the ground. And then between 2 rows of peas we have carrots. So we try to maximize our use of space that way. Okay, we use a pelleted carrot seed, the variety called Bolero. Really does well, though this year, 2014, we had kind of a minor stand, so normally we get enough carrots to last us the whole year. We put them in a refrigerator and store them at about 40 degrees all winter, but this year we may run out of them sooner than later. But it's a very nice crop that's coming on right now, and we usually grow 1 row of them of Bolero carrots. Well, coming from Iowa, I'm somebody who likes sweet corn, and we've been able to grow it well here using the variety Northern Extra Sweet. We've got 4 rows, about 50 feet long, and we'll pick enough corn off of this to freeze it to essentially again last us all year. And it's just about ready to come off this year, about mid-August, which is a little bit on the early side, but looks like it's going to be a good crop.
Well, Don, this looks like a fruit tree here, but I don't see any fruit on it.
That's because it's an apricot tree. We have 2 of them in our yard. One's about 40 years old, the other's about 15. The 40-year-old tree, we have harvested fruit, I think 4 times. But when it's loaded, it's really loaded, but most of the time the blossoms are frozen off, and so we don't get any crop.
So the tree is hardy enough to survive here. Most springs aren't conducive to producing a crop.
That's exactly right.
Well, I hate to bring this up, but I've heard from your family that Don is not allowed to pick the peas. Now, why is that, Judy?
Because I like to pick the peas. That's why. Besides that, he tends not to pick all the peas.
Is that right? Does he miss some?
He misses a lot.
Well, hello, young lady. Who are you?
I'm Ellen Quist. I'm Don Mathre's granddaughter.
And Ellen, you've been in Bozeman all summer. Tell us what you've been doing.
I've been working part-time at a lab up at MSU doing research on honeybees, and I've also spent a lot of time helping out in the garden.
Well, we sure appreciate the help you've given us at the club garden.
Well, thank you. It's been nice to be here.
And you're going home soon?
Yes, tomorrow.